Do you worry sometimes when you're speaking English that you are not sounding as polite as you would like to be? In today's lesson, I'll teach you 30 phrases that will help you be polite, and it will help you get what you want when you're speaking English because people will think you're so kind and polite, they will want to help you out. Let's get started with today's lesson so that you can sound like a kind and polite and professional English speaker. Instead of just saying, "Can I have it?" when you want something or you want someone to hand you a physical object, try out saying, "Could I take a look at it?" This phrase comes off a lot more gentle and passive when you want to hold something in your hand. Maybe someone is trying to figure out how to use something. Let's say the television remote. They don't know how to do it and you don't feel patient. So instead of just saying, "Can I have it? Give it to me," you say, "Hey, let me take a look. Can I take a look at it?" Now, similarly, we want to avoid phrases like "give it to me." That sounds really stern, really harsh. It sounds like you're in a bad mood. In order to sound polite, we might use a phrase, "Could I get one of those, please?" Let's say that someone is handing out different papers to a group. Maybe you're in a meeting and they're handing out papers that say the agenda for the meeting. Instead of just saying, "Give me that. Can I have it?" Say, "Could I get one of those, please?" Now, in any language, in any culture, it's definitely rude to make a person wait while you're doing something, especially, if you're late, if you're going too slow and people are impatient. Instead of saying, "Hurry up," we can use a phrase like, "Hey, no rush, but we are short on time." So we're using, but after saying "no rush" to let the person know that we are needing them to hurry up, but we're not just saying, "Hurry up, let's go, come on," because those phrases come off as a little aggressive and rude. We're softening our speech. We're saying, "Hey, no rush." That means I don't want to pressure you. Even though we are in a rush, we're trying to go fast. No rush, but we're a little short on time. This phrase, "short on time," it means we have somewhere to go. We don't have a lot of time to spend doing this. And, it just shows that you would appreciate if the person tried to do their job a little faster. Now, I will say, if you're working and you're going to the driver's license facility, a government facility in the United States, they are going to be slow no matter what. I know it's kind of the same in every other country. But, if you tell them, "Oh, no rush, but I'm short on time," they're probably going to go slower. So in any other case, besides trying to get your driver's license or government documents, this phrase would be helpful and it would be polite to use in the United States. Similarly, you could say, "Hey, no rush, but I do have to go soon," or "No rush, but I only have a few minutes." It's just politely letting the person know that you do have to leave soon. It's politely hurrying them along without just saying, "Hurry up, I gotta go, my time's really important." So one thing we want to be very careful about in speaking English is we don't want to make our phrases and our sentences orders, like we're ordering someone around, we're telling them what to do. We want to be offering suggestions so that, they know what we want them to do, but they don't feel like we're being, a drill instructor, very harsh and very strict. So instead of telling your guests at your house, "Hang up your coats right there," you might want to say, "Hey, feel free to hang up your coats right there." This phrase, "feel free," I find this to be very useful to offer a suggestion of what you want the person to do. I actually use this with my own young children a lot. "Hey, feel free to come to the table and eat dinner." This usually works without me having to say, "Come on, it's dinner time, let's go. Hey, feel free to come sit with us." And then, a lot of times my kids are like, "Oh, you're offering a nice suggestion. Sure, I'll do it." So obviously I want my children to come eat with us. I'm basically telling them to, but I'm trying to be more tact and more, gentle in my suggestions so that way they feel like I'm not being harsh or rude. So you can use this not just with children, but just with anyone. "Hey, feel free to send me that email today." That means I want you to send it, but, feel free to send it if it's ready. So a lot of times if we want someone to start a task a little early, we'll say, "Feel free to start early if you want to." This just means like you're welcome to do it early. It actually would be helpful. So this phrase, "feel free," It's very useful when you're suggesting something to someone that you want them to do before, you start sounding more harsh and more forceful. Obviously, there are situations where you do need to be forceful, like I need this email, I need this report by 2:00. Feel free to send it to me before 2:00. It's just a polite way to ask them to do it early. Another way we use this phrase, feel free, is when we want to make sure that somebody knows, if they're our guest, that they can do things in their house by themselves or they can access things by themselves. So you could say, hey, feel free to get yourself something to drink. This just means if you're thirsty, like go ahead and open the fridge, get a cup out. I'm not going to be serving you this whole time. Now, sometimes, people are more formal and they'll say, can I get you anything to drink? And if the person says, no, I'm not thirsty right now, you might say, oh, feel free to get something later if you want. So this just comes off, again, as very polite, very gentle, very courteous way of just saying, get yourself a drink if you want it. Obviously, that is way more rude to say. So this phrase, feel free, is softening the suggestion. Another really important phrase that I like to teach my students is if you are welcoming someone into your home or your space or, even a client into your business, you can say, feel free to make yourself at home. This is just a polite way of saying, sit down and relax, like enjoy yourself, feel comfortable. Because those all come off as orders rather than a suggestion. Make yourself at home or feel free to make yourself at home. This means just feel comfortable. Feel like you're at home. And most people take this as a nice way of just saying, like, you can sit down, get yourself something to drink, something to eat. Like, don't feel like you have to feel uncomfortable and you're putting on, a professional face. You can just relax a bit. Do you know what it means in English for someone to say that they are going to sugarcoat something? So this phrase, it's a really good idiom. It just means that you're going to deliver some bad news or you're going to say something that's pretty negative, but you're going to try to make it sound good. It's kind of like someone is eating some disgusting, bad tasting food, but you're adding a ton of sugar so that it tastes good. So you're adding sugar to what you're going to say to make it sound better than it is. You're kind of sugarcoating it. Sometimes in English, people say, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This means they're going to just tell you the bad news without trying to make it sound positive, or you're not trying to make it sound like it has a bright side or a positive aspect to it. You're just saying, hey, this is the situation. It's pretty bad. It sucks. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But sometimes people do say, I'm going to try to sugarcoat it, which means you're going to make it sound like it's not that bad, like it's positive almost. There are tons of ways in English that you can kind of sugarcoat the way that you're saying things if you're in a situation where you don't want to come off too negative or you don't want to tell someone, a whole bad story about something that happened, because sometimes it's just not a good time to get into negative details. One funny thing that, I think is funny at least, is that a lot of celebrities and influencer people online, when they are getting divorced now, they won't just say, we got divorced, we're not married anymore. I hate the person's guts. This phrase, I hate their guts, it means I really don't like them. They're, using nice ways to say it. So Gwyneth Paltrow said, we are doing a conscious uncoupling. This is a way of saying that they got divorced. She got divorced from the lead singer of Coldplay. I would recommend just saying it so that people aren't confused about what you're trying to say if you do need to tell someone that you're getting divorced or you are divorced. But this is just a funny language thing that I've noticed online. If you want to say that you are no longer friends with someone, maybe you had a big fight or something really bad happened where you don't like the person anymore, but you don't want to tell someone about the big fight, you could just say, we decided to cut ties, especially if you're in a professional situation and there is a bad situation too, like we cut ties. That just means like we don't do business anymore. Not getting into the details, but we're not really connected because we cut ties. This is the idiom, we cut ties. Or if you want to, kind of tell someone that you're not friends, but you don't want to talk about a fight that you had with someone, you can say, oh, we just drifted apart. This is a nice way of saying we don't talk anymore, but drifting apart typically means, maybe you just didn't have a lot of things in common anymore, or you don't live close anymore. you can kind of just be hiding the real reason why you aren't friends with someone anymore. And the last way of kind of sugarcoating the reason that you're not friends with someone anymore is to say we lost touch. Now, a lot of times this just means like we don't communicate anymore. Again, maybe you just live far away or you don't have a lot of things in common anymore. You don't have their phone number anymore. They deleted their social media. We lost touch. And this could just also be a nice way of saying like, I just don't talk to the person anymore. I don't like them. Without having to say that, because again, this can come off just really negative and really rude. So those are some really good sugar-coated phrases. We lost touch, we drifted apart, just to say you're not talking to someone anymore. Now let's talk about something that is so important when learning a language. It's learning how to ask for a favor, but in a really polite way. Because again, we want to be polite so that people know that our intentions are good when we ask for things, and people will be more likely to help us out. A really, really good phrase to learn is, would you be so kind to... and then you ask them to do something for you. Now you can use this in small instances like, would you be so kind to pass me the salt when you're at a table with someone? Or you could say, would you be so kind to tell me what time it is? And this is just a really polite, extra polite way of asking someone for a small favor. Or a lot of times we use this phrase when we're asking for some sort of information like the time. Sometimes if you are in a crowded space and they're selling some food or something. Recently I was at a basketball game and I was walking around the stadium and I was looking for popcorn and I saw someone holding some popcorn. And so I walked up to them and I said, would you be so kind as to tell me where you got that? This just means like, can you tell me where you bought that? Because I really want that too. And obviously if I'm stopping someone randomly in a crowded public place, like I want to be really polite when I ask them. And of course they were happy to tell me where they got the popcorn, and I love eating popcorn, so I was happy as well. If you want to ask to borrow something or just kind of intrude on someone's space, a good phrase to know is just adding, would it be all right if... Sometimes if you are eating at a restaurant, or not really a restaurant, but a place with lots of tables, maybe it's like a food court in a mall, a space in a library, and you have a group of people and you need an extra chair, and you see someone sitting at a table with extra chairs, you could say, would it be all right if I took this chair? Or if you show up to maybe a college or university or a business meeting somewhere where there's a group setting and you want to make sure that nobody is sitting in the chair already that you are going to sit in, you can ask the person sitting nearby, is it all right if I sit here? Is anyone sitting here? Is it all right? So is it all right if? Is it all right if I borrow your pen? This can just be a really polite, gentle, sugar-coated way of asking someone for something. When you want to make sure that you are not inconveniencing someone and you want to let them know that, I think I'm asking for a pretty big favor or something that's going to require a lot of effort from you, you can say, it's a big ask. One time, my neighbor, their lawnmower was broken, and they said, it's a big ask, but could you mow part of our lawn? We'll pay you. And of course, we wanted to just be neighborly, be polite, be kind, so we did it for free. It was a big ask for them because, yes, it required a lot of our time, but, it was a really polite way of saying, like, we know this is kind of a big thing to ask. We're sorry if this is too much. It's a big ask, but could you do this? And a lot of times, if you're polite, if you just acknowledge that it requires a lot of time or effort from someone, the person will be willing to do it just because it shows you're grateful for their time and effort. One really uncomfortable aspect of being at a new job, especially, if you're just learning how to do the job and there's someone really knowledgeable, maybe it's your boss or just someone who's been working at the company for longer, you have to ask them a lot of questions. I want you to keep in mind these polite phrases that you can use instead of just apologizing, saying, sorry to ask, I'm so sorry. Because when you apologize too much, it implies that you're doing something wrong. And if you don't know the answer, it's definitely not wrong to ask. One way is just to say, I understand if you're busy. But could I ask you a question real quick? Or you can say, I understand if you're busy, could I ask you a favor? This just acknowledges that the person has a lot of things to do and it's not always their responsibility to answer your questions, but it's being nice, saying, you can say no, but I do have a question. And again, lots of times people are happy to help. Another way before you ask a question is to say, is this a convenient time for me to ask a question? Or is this a convenient time for me to talk with you for a minute? This just lets them, say, come back later. Oh no, this is fine. Come on in. This is a convenient time, especially if you don't have an appointment or if the person is typically very busy. Hey, is this a convenient time? Is this an inconvenient time? You can ask it either way, just asking the person if they have time to help you at the moment. And if you're asking for someone to do something or a favor, you can say, hey, if you get a minute, could you please send me this thing? Or could you please help me with this? This just states, it doesn't really matter when you do it. I'm not ordering you to do it right now. I'm not trying to, again, inconvenience you, make this a bad time of doing something if you're too busy. But when you get a minute, or you can say, when you get a free minute, or a free moment, could you help me with this? Again, this is just being polite and it's being courteous to someone's time. While I say that we don't want to say sorry or apologize too many times, especially if you're just simply asking someone for help or for information, if you do want to just use these next phrases once in a while, I think that's a really polite way to make sure that, someone knows you're not trying to bother them. So one way is to say, sorry to impose. This just means sorry to, bother you. Or if someone has to help you with a problem, you can say, oh, I'm sorry for the trouble. And typically people want to be polite, so they'll say, oh, it's no trouble at all, like don't apologize. Sorry to impose and sorry for the trouble. There are two really good phrases to use when you're asking someone something or you don't want to bother them. Finally, when you are wanting to say thank you in English, there's more than just one way, of course. I'm not going to tell you don't say thank you because obviously it's a very powerful phrase in itself, thank you. But here are just some extra ways of expressing more gratitude or just switching up the phrase that you use. So a phrase that I like to say when someone hands me something or just does a quick favor for me, hey, can you get that for me? Thank you kindly. I like to say thank you kindly. It's just a fun, kind of different expression than just saying thank you. Another thing that I like to say is, oh, you're the best. When someone does something that is just super helpful, you can say, oh, you're the best. And it's just supposed to make the person feel good. It doesn't have to be literal, like they don't have to be literally the best person ever, but it's just saying like, you are really great at helping out. If you want to say, thanks for understanding that I made a mistake or I need some extra help, you're it's almost like an apology, but you're not saying sorry. You can say, thanks for your understanding. Just use that phrase, thanks for your understanding. I'm so sorry I'm late. Thanks for your understanding. This is just showing that the person is very kind to you, even though you made a mistake or you had something kind of negative happen. When you are emailing someone and, you're emailing them a question or a proposition, or especially if you're applying to a job, one way that we can close our email is to say, thanks for your consideration. And this just means thanks for taking the time to think about what I'm emailing to you, what I'm asking of you, or considering me for a job. So this phrase is very powerful in an email especially. Finally, just a really nice way of expressing a lot of gratitude for someone who has been really helpful, really supporting is just to say, your support means a lot to me. I like this phrase because I think it's important to tell people how much their kind words and their support actually is helping you out. Because some people think that they are not appreciated in life, and this just goes the extra mile to show that you really do care about their support and their effort. In today's conversation, we have Agatha, who is my rude character for you. And then we have Carrie, who is a very sweet character, but she has to respond back to Agatha being rude to her. And I would say in this conversation, Agatha is really gaslighting Carrie. This is a really common phrase to describe someone who's being rude by making things seem like not reality. Let me explain a little bit more. So in this conversation, Agatha says, that's not that hard. Your classes don't sound that hard.
But to Carrie, they are very difficult, and she's being honest in this conversation. So Agatha is really trying to gaslight her into thinking that her classes are not hard. So that's your first vocabulary word for today, to gaslight someone.
Carrie, what are you doing? Hey, Agatha, I'm just getting ready for my classes this year. My schedule is going to be really challenging. Stop making such a big deal. All you have to do is get off your butt and work hard.
So when Agatha says, stop making such a big deal, that's such a rude phrase because honestly, if someone is making a big deal out of something or it's very important or significant to them, you shouldn't say, that's no big deal. That's not such a big deal. It's very rude. There are many different ways to say stop being lazy in English. We'll talk about a few in this English lesson. And there's lots of rude ways to say it as well. I feel like in the United States, we really value hard work and we push this culture of being very productive all the time and kind of making people feel guilty for taking vacation or their lazy time, even though I think it's perfectly acceptable to have time where you're lazy and you're kind of recharging your energy. So in this conversation, Agatha is very rude. She says, get off your butt. That means stop being lazy, and it's very rude.
Easy for you to say, get off my back, Agatha.
A good way to respond to someone who's concerning themselves over your business or, just saying rude things to you and criticizing what you're doing is to say, get off my back. If you say, get off my back to someone, it's a harsh phrase, but if you need to use it, it means that you need to stop worrying about me and stop criticizing me. Just leave me alone. Get off my back.
Are you going to get rid of that good-for-nothing boyfriend of yours?
Agatha, Agatha, Agatha. She is so rude in this conversation. She calls Carrie's boyfriend good for nothing. If you say someone is good for nothing, you're being extremely rude and you're saying they are useless.
I think he's a total deadbeat.
Another way that Agatha insults Carrie's boyfriend in this conversation is she says he's a deadbeat. We say that someone's a deadbeat to be really mean and rude when they don't have a job or you don't think they're doing things that are helpful to anyone. But again, these are rude phrases in this conversation.
My boyfriend, he's a hard worker. You're out of line.
A good way to respond to someone who's making these really rude comments and commenting on something especially that they shouldn't be commenting on, like your boyfriend, you can say, you are totally out of line. This means that you've crossed a boundary. You have no right to be talking about this or making rude comments about it.
Are you still talking? Take your hate comments somewhere else, Agatha.
In the United States, we talk about hate or haters as, negative comments or somebody who makes negative comments. So if you want to say to someone, you're just a hater, that means you're very negative. Like all you want to do is say negative comments. You never look at anything positive. And that's kind of an insult, but sometimes you need to tell people they're a hater.
By the way, did you tell all of our friends about the video of me yelling at that Starbucks barista for giving me the wrong order?
So in the United States, we always use the word for slang now. We say someone is a Karen. And I didn't want to insult Karens in this conversation, so I named my rude character Agatha because I don't know that many people named Agatha in this world. So Agatha said that there's a video of her yelling at a Starbucks barista, which if you didn't know, in the United States, we call somebody who works at a coffee shop and makes coffee and lattes and cappuccinos. We call that person's job barista. I used to be a barista actually when I was in college. It's a great job.
No, Sherlock, I didn't tell everyone. Everyone saw it because you made a total fool of yourself and it went viral.
There are many viral videos on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram of these Karens or very rude women yelling at Starbucks baristas or any sort of workers in food business about getting their order wrong. And of course, you need to be way more understanding when it comes to customer service and treating workers respectfully. So Agatha in this conversation said, I know you told everyone, but Carrie said, no, the video went viral. That means millions of people just happened to see the video online. We call it a viral video if tons of people see it. And something can go viral for good reasons, Like my English lessons, I love when my English lessons go viral because they're helpful. But things can go viral for the wrong reasons. And it seems like that happens more often, like someone having outrageous or very rude behavior. So a really sarcastic phrase in English we say when someone is just saying things as if they're accusing you because they have all this evidence, even though they don't, is we say, okay, Sherlock, or yeah, sure, Sherlock. Sherlock, of course, is Sherlock Holmes, the great detective who's, a fictional detective. But when we call someone Sherlock, we're saying like, wow, you're so smart, you're so investigative. And it's sarcastic because we're saying that they're not really smart and they have no evidence to back up what they're saying. And if you want to say that someone's behavior was terrible, you can say you made a fool of yourself. That means you made a huge embarrassing scene and it's all because of your own actions and you have to take responsibility for how terrible you were being.
I can't trust you as far as I can throw you. I bet you told everyone.
If someone says that they can trust you as far as they can throw you, it means they can't trust you very much because usually you can't throw a person very far. So this idiom or, this kind of simile, it just means that I can't trust you. I can trust you as far as I can throw you. It means I can't trust you.
Whatever you say. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you. Go touch grass. I'll talk to you later.
So Carrie, she's responding very sarcastically back to Agatha. To be honest, she's kind of fighting fire with fire. That means she's being rude back to Agatha because Agatha is being rude to her. And she said, well, it was a pleasure talking to you. If you say, well, it's a pleasure, but you don't really mean it, you're being very sarcastic. This is very common sarcasm that's used in English conversations.
Hey, wait, don't you tell me to touch grass.
And my favorite phrase in this whole lesson, it's kind of a new phrase. I see it in TikTok comments and I've used it once or twice just to be funny, but it's pretty rude, is to say, go touch grass. That means you need to stop spending so much time online on your computer or your phone, and you need to just go outside because you're spending way too much time on the internet. Go touch grass.
Way to go. Way to be prepared. Way to get that done. Hey, way to be on time. So this phrase, way to, or commonly way to go, is a really kind and polite and genuine way to compliment someone's effort or compliment the way that someone is doing something.
Way to go, Jack. Way to go.
Now, we do say congratulations sometimes in English, but not as frequently as other languages use the phrase congratulations. So maybe your colleague at work has been working really hard on a project and their finished product is really good. You could say, way to work really hard on that. Now, you have to use a warm and genuine tone when you're giving this compliment so that the person understands that you're being very serious and very genuine. The easiest way to use this phrase is just to say, way to go. So maybe your friend aced the exam. That means they did very, very well on a test. You can say, you aced the exam. Way to go. This is just a polite and friendly way to congratulate them for doing so well. Maybe your friend at work finishes a project before the deadline. You can say, you finished ahead of schedule. Way to go. So again, it's just a really polite way to praise someone's effort, and you might have your effort praised by someone with this phrase in English as well. They might be saying, your English sounds so great. I can tell you've been studying so much. Way to go. Sometimes we use this phrase in slightly different ways. Another way we can say this phrase is way to be. It means the exact same as way to go. It's a bit less common, but you will hear it once in a while. Another thing that's really common to say with this phrase is way to handle something. Maybe you're at work and you have a customer that is trying to argue with you, and you are just very polite and calm, and you figure out the situation and you get a compliment. Someone might say, way to handle that rude customer, or way to handle that argument. It just means you did a really good job in staying calm and composed and polite in general. If you want to encourage someone that has not given up on a goal, or they haven't given up despite some setbacks or some difficulties, you can say way to stick with it. Maybe your friend has been running and training for a marathon race for almost a year. You could say, you have trained for almost a year. Way to stick with it. This means I'm complimenting you on your efforts and just not giving up for doing something for so long. The next way we use this phrase very commonly is with this idiom, way to think outside the box. This phrase is just complimenting someone's way of thinking. They thought of a solution to a problem that is not the normal or conventional way of doing it. And because they thought of something so original, it solved the problem. So the phrase we would use is way to think outside the box.
Hey, way to think outside the box, Frank.
When someone starts something new without someone telling them to do it, or they take the lead on something, again, with not someone telling them that they have to do it, you can compliment their initiative. You can say, way to take initiative. This is a really common compliment as well. Maybe you have someone in your life that started a business and it's a side business, even though they have a full-time job and they started making a lot of money with their business. You could say, way to take initiative and just start a business on your own. So you're just complimenting their leadership and the way that they do things. Now, for this phrase, way to go or way to take initiative, way to think outside the box, whatever it might be, I would say this phrase is best used in a bit of a more informal setting. Like you wouldn't want to be in a meeting and necessarily say this if you're at work, but you can definitely say it with your friends at work. And it's not slang, it's not so informal, it's just a bit less formal than what you would say when you're writing an email. We better not go in there. Linda is sleeping. We better not take too much. Other people might be hungry. It's best not to go in there. Linda's sleeping. It's best not to take too much. Other people might be hungry. It's best if we talk quietly. We better talk quietly. One thing that I notice when I speak with English learners, even very advanced English speakers, is that sometimes they're becoming a bit rude because they're not using suggestion. They're just telling things, they're giving orders, or they're being bossy. And I think that this is because in some languages, the way that we speak is, we're very direct. We say what we want to do, who we want to do it, whatever it might be. In English, in order to be more polite, you do have to give more of a suggestion. This next phrase that we'll go over will help you with this. So the phrase is, we better not. Or you can say, we better.
We better not.
So if you want to give a caution or advisory against doing something because it either is not the best option, it might get you in trouble, it might offend someone, you can say, we better not. It just suggests that this is not a wise choice. There is a good reason not to do this, but it's not so confronting as saying, don't do this, we shouldn't do this, stop this right now. That comes off as a bit more confrontational and, again, direct, which we tend to be less direct about telling people things in English. So we better not do something or we better do something. This phrase is used in a bit more of an informal context. Again, acceptable most of the time, but we typically wouldn't use this in writing in a formal email. Now, the more formal version of this phrase is best not or we best.
Best not.
The full phrase here is it's best not to. For instance, maybe your friend is sleeping and they haven't been feeling well. You could say it's best not to wake them up. They haven't been feeling well. So you're giving a suggestion that we shouldn't do this. So again, this is a bit more formal than saying we better not. It's best not to leave your valuable items in your car while it's parked, especially if you're in a big city. You could also say, you better not leave your valuable items in a car in a big city. This is implying it's not good to do this because someone could break into your car and steal your computer or your money or whatever it might be. Maybe you need to go talk to your boss and you have a problem that you need to bring to their attention. Your friend might tell you at work, well, it's best not to talk to them while they are hungry. Maybe wait till after lunch. Or they might say, you better not talk to them now. They're hungry, wait till after lunch. So they're giving you a suggestion that you should wait until later. So you can use either of these phrases in English. Maybe you've heard through these examples that it's best not to is more formal than we better not do this.
But again, they both just suggest caution and they just suggest that there is a better way to do something. Again, if you're trying to be more friendly, I think I would recommend the phrase, we better not do this, rather than saying, it's best not to do this, because it's best not to do this becomes a bit more formal and authoritative. And we better not do this is more of a suggestion and polite, but people take it very serious, even though you're not being super direct. If you want to give a reminder to someone, maybe you want them to remember to do something like lock the door at night, you can say, we better not forget to lock the door tonight, or we better lock the door tonight. This is, again, a really friendly thing, and just the communication difference in the style that Americans speak versus the rest of the world is like we like to be more suggestive rather than direct and just giving orders. Since we're talking about food, on that note, let's go get lunch. On that note, how's your health been? Speaking of family, on that note, how are your kids? One way that you can improve on your politeness is by working on your transitions in a conversation. In a conversation, each subject should flow into the next when you're speaking English if you're just trying to maintain that polite and friendly demeanor. So, for instance, instead of saying, can we talk about this now? Or, oh, now I want to tell you about this, we can help flow the conversation by using this next phrase, on that note.
And on that note,
So, on that note is just the phrase or the idiom that English speakers use to mean kind of related to this subject. I want to introduce this next topic. When you use this phrase, you are implying that something that you are about to talk about kind of relates to the last subject that you and the other speaker were speaking about. So, let's say you are in a work meeting and everyone's talking about emailing people for a project. You can say, on that note, I'd like to talk about communication more, how we can improve our communication. So instead of just introducing the topic as we need to get better at communication, you're kind of relating it to the last thing and making it seem more natural to bring up in the meeting or the conversation. You can also use this phrase to conclude a meeting or conclude a conversation. So maybe you start talking about a subject that's a bit more negative or more sad. You can say, well, on that note, I'm actually going to leave now. I'll see you later. You just have to make sure that when you use this phrase, you're relating a bit to the last subject that has been talked about. You're not introducing something that's completely new. Or if you're using this phrase to conclude or end a conversation, make sure you're ending on a spot, where the conversation stops pretty naturally. Maybe your friend is starting to talk about how they are trying to be more healthy and they're starting exercising. You could say, on that note, would you like to go get a salad with me? So you're implying that, because you're trying to be healthy, let's go eat something healthy together. Or maybe someone is brought up in a conversation and you want to ask how they're doing. Sometimes my friend will talk about her family and I'll say, oh, on that note, how is your sister doing? So it just transitions the conversation to where you want it to go while relating to what they were saying. Could you possibly lend me your notes from the lecture? Would you be so kind as to lend me the notes from the lecture? Could we possibly arrange a meeting for Monday? Would you be so kind as to arrange a meeting for Monday? Could you possibly update the document with the latest numbers? Would you be so kind as to update the document with the latest numbers? In English, again, as I've mentioned before, it's best not to be super direct and forceful in your language if you're trying to come off as very polite and more friendly. Of course, there's a time to be direct and forceful, but in this case, I'm going to give you some phrases that can help you make requests or ask for something without being so forceful and direct, so that you can come off as more friendly and you can start to build relationships before you can be more direct with someone. The first phrase is, would you be so kind as to? This is a way to ask someone to do something. So let's give some examples here.
Please, would you be so kind as to call my wife?
This can be used in a really formal setting. You can send an email to someone in a business setting saying, would you be so kind as to send the documents by the end of today? This means, I'm making a pretty big request. It's very kind if you do this for me. Or you can use this in a bit of a less formal setting as well.
If you're at a dinner table and you want to ask someone to pass you something like the salt shaker, you could say, "Would you be so kind as to pass me the salt?" This phrase is used to make requests in a very polite manner. And it's even going a step beyond just saying, "Can you please do this?" It's, "Would you be so kind as to do this?" If you want to ask for a conversation with someone, you can say, "Would you be so kind as to spare a few minutes to talk to me?" This is, making a request that you have time to have a conversation with them. If you are asking for someone's opinion in a really respectful way, you could say, "Would you be so kind as to tell me what you think about this?" And again, it's just very polite and respectful way to ask for something. Another phrase that's very useful for requesting things in this kind way is to say, "Could you possibly?" It's very indirect way of asking for someone to do something. Of course, you're not asking if they actually can do it. You're asking, would you mind doing? Would you do it for me? Could you possibly? Could you possibly send me those documents by the end of the day? This is a less formal way of asking, but again, it's very polite. Or you could say, "Could you possibly hand me the salt?" Again, of course, they can hand you the salt. They have the ability to do it. They have the skills to do it. But you're just asking if they can do it. They can spare the time. You're being respectful in your request.
Could you possibly fix...
Maybe you're going into a government office, and as we know, government employees can be a bit rude and hard to deal with. No offense if you're a government employee, but that's just the reputation that you have. And you are looking for the correct form that you have to fill out for something. You could say, "Could you possibly show me the correct form to fill out?" Or, "Would you be so kind as to give me the correct form to fill out?" Just make your requests very polite and very respectfully, and hopefully they will treat you the exact same way. If you're asking your English teacher to help you out with something, you could say, "Could you possibly take a look at this document I typed to look for mistakes?" This is just a really nice, friendly way of asking for help. And make sure when you have these requests and the person helps you out or does whatever you ask, you show your gratitude. You say, "Thank you so much," or, "You're so kind. That's great. Thank you so much for the help."
First, let's talk about why it's so important to be polite in any language. Of course, you can be polite and still say no to someone.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
In English, we have a phrase, "no means no," which really just means to respect someone's boundaries. We refer to someone's boundaries as what they're willing to do or willing to sacrifice for another person. Some people have really strict boundaries around their family. Maybe the weekend for them is family time and they do not work at all on weekends. So maybe if their boss asks them to take on some extra work or to take some work home, they say, "No, I'm sorry, I don't work on weekends because it's really important for me to spend time with my family." This would be a really polite and respectful way to say no to your boss. Now remember, when we're being polite and we're refusing something, we're always going to be honest, so we're never going to make something up or lie. And just remember throughout this whole lesson, if you want to be polite, your tone, speaking in a happy, polite tone, a calm tone, is always very important. The context of a situation is always the most important as well. And then your word choice is also going to make your phrases sound more polite.
No means no!
Let's review 5 key phrases when it comes to declining something. So pay close attention because these phrases, they're going to be your bread and butter when being polite and declining or refusing something. And your bread and butter, this is just an idiom that means something very important, very essential to what we're doing here. The first phrase is "I'd love to, but." I'd love to help you, but I'm actually busy right now. This is a really softened way to decline something. Or if someone asks you to go to a movie tonight and you're busy, "I'd love to, but unfortunately, I already committed to staying at home and studying."
I'd love to, but I can't.
This is my top phrase when it comes to politely declining something because it's showing that you're interested. It's showing that you would be enthusiastic if you didn't already have a prior commitment or a reason that you couldn't help or do whatever it is the person is asking. You can even use this if someone says, hey, do you have a few minutes to come look over here? Or would you like to give money to this charity? Whatever it might be. You could say, I'd love to, but unfortunately I can't today. Remember, you don't always have to elaborate a big story or a big excuse. Keep it simple when you are refusing something or declining something. If you want to show that you are sorry that you can't do something and you want to add a bit of an apology, you could say, I'm sorry, but I can't.
I'm sorry, but I can't.
Maybe your coworker says, would you like to come to my son's birthday party this weekend? And you might say, I'm sorry, but I can't. I actually already have plans. So again, this can be used in any of the situations that we've already reviewed. You can either say, I'd love to, but, or I'm sorry, but I can't. Now, these two phrases, they're pretty similar. They're both, saying I would like to, but I just can't right now because of some reason. A more formal way to politely decline something or refuse something is to say, unfortunately, I can't right now, or unfortunately, I'm unable to. If someone says, would you like to meet at this time? Unfortunately, I'm unable to meet at that time because I'm busy. Can you help me with this project? Unfortunately, right now, I can't help because I have lots of things of my own to deal with. So again, this is a bit more formal. You could definitely use this in an email just because it is a bit more formal. Now, let's say your neighbor asks you if you want to come over for dinner. You think this is very nice, but at that time, you don't really want to go over to your neighbors. You can simply say, I appreciate the offer, but unfortunately, we have to pass tonight. Now, you can provide more of a detailed excuse why you can't, but remember, never lie and never make up a story because it's only going to get more awkward, especially if you are trying to make up the story in English. You might get your words confused, so I would just stick to something very simple. Your neighbor comes over and asks you to have dinner. You might say, I appreciate it, but tonight we've actually already have plans. Or I appreciate it, but actually we're going to bed early tonight. Just something very simple. If someone questions you, you just need to stand firm on your boundary. I really like this phrase, I appreciate it, because it's showing your gratitude and it's showing your politeness and your appreciation for their offer, and it will make the person feel good. You don't want them to feel rejected or disrespected by you saying no. And that goes for if someone says, hey, can I help you with that right now? Sometimes if you want to decline help or just decline them, getting involved, you can say, oh, I appreciate it, but I've totally got it. You just sit down and relax. Thank you so much. So again, just thank you for their offer. Thanks so much for offering. That's another great phrase that you can use as well.
Really appreciate it, but I don't have the time right now.
Now let's go back to this imaginary situation of your neighbor coming over and asking if you want to come over for dinner. Maybe you do really like that neighbor, but just the day that they've asked you to have dinner, it's not working well. Maybe you just have a lot of things going on in your home. Maybe you don't feel good. Maybe you're just feeling lazy and tired. You might say, how about another time? Or you can even say, maybe another time. This again is going back to the phrase of taking a rain check. In English, we say, I'll take a rain check, which means you'll do it on a day that works better than this day because there's some sort of circumstance that makes it unable to happen. So maybe another time is another good phrase that says, we're interested, thanks for the offer, but let's reschedule it for when it's a better time for me.
Maybe another time.
Let's review how you can actually use these phrases in context when someone asks you something and you need to decline. Let's go back to the very first example in this lesson. Your friend, and maybe this is a newer friend that you haven't known for a long time, but you really like them and you really hope that you can continue their friendship. Now they say, do you want to go to the concert with us tonight? Although you would like to go with them, you've already made plans with a family member and tonight is just not a good night. How would you politely decline the invitation without feeling rude or maybe just without having bad feelings with this new friend? Maybe you combine a couple of phrases that we've already learned. You might say, I'd love to, but I already made plans. Maybe next time? And this is showing not only that you are excited that they offered the invitation, you'd say, I'd love to, and you're saying that you're busy, you already have plans with a family member, and then adding maybe next time or perhaps next time is just showing that you want to keep continuing the friendship and you do want to do something with them in the future. This is just a great example of how you can actually refuse an invitation without feeling rude to someone that you want to be friends with.
I'd love to, but I have plans on Sunday.
Well, maybe some other time.
Let's move on to another scenario. This time, you are at work and you need to decline an offer for help. Sometimes it can feel really rude to say no when someone's offering to be helpful. They're offering to do something for you, but sometimes we don't want the help. And we want people to know that we also just don't need the help. So your colleague says, hey, can I help you with this project? It seems like a lot of work. You might say, I really appreciate it, but I've got it under control. Thanks anyway. So again, we're saying, instead of saying thanks for the offer, we're saying, I appreciate it. I appreciate you offering help because it is a nice offer. And you say, I've got it under control, which should be true in the situation. And again, we're just showing that gratitude, thanks anyway. And I like to either say thanks anyway or thanks for the offer. Thanks again for offering. Now, what if someone is requesting or asking you to do a favor for them? Let's go back to that neighbor. Maybe they say, can you watch my dog this weekend? You might politely respond, I'm sorry, I'm actually busy this weekend, but I hope you find someone. Again, there's kind of 3 parts to this sentence. You say, I'm sorry, apologizing. You're saying, maybe I wish I could. Maybe I wish I couldn't because I don't like dogs or I just don't want the responsibility of watching your dog. We're not saying these things, but oh, I'm sorry, I'm busy this weekend. And then we're adding, I hope you find someone, just to be polite. I hope it works out for you. So again, in a lot of these situations, when you can't help someone, you can say, I hope it works out for you, or I hope you find someone to help you. Here are 4 tips that will help you be polite when you are refusing an offer or declining something. The first, I've already mentioned, always be honest. In English, we say honesty is the best policy. This phrase kind of rhymes, but it's just a very true way to live. Honesty is the best policy. Always show gratitude, thank the person for their invite, thank the person for their offer, say, oh, thanks for thinking of me, but I'm actually busy. You're always thanking the person for even just offering something or asking you something. This helps you feel more polite and it keeps the relationship friendly, even when you have to reject them or refuse something. Even myself, a native English speaker, I just have to keep it brief. When you're offering an excuse or an explanation as to why you can't do something or why you don't want to do something, it's better just to offer a very simple excuse, because when you start telling a very long story, you might be exposing yourself and the person might think, well, really, that's why you can't do this weekend? Which, they're judging you in a way, but it's also just making it so maybe you're stumbling over your words and the situation is becoming more awkward. I think most people are very, very understanding if you just give a brief excuse, especially if you're just being honest. And then if you can offer another time to do something, if someone invites you to do something, or another time that you can help or you're available, that always keeps the relationship friendly and polite as well. And this isn't always possible, but if you can do it, definitely offer, oh, I can't today, but maybe next week, or I can't, but let's think of another time. Let's take a couple of minutes at the end of this lesson to practice your refusing or polite declining. Now, first, let's pretend that I'm your coworker. It's about 10 o'clock and I say, hey, do you want to get lunch at noon? If you're busy, think of a response how you could politely decline my offer. You might say, I'd love to, but I'm actually so busy, I might just work through lunch. Or I'd love to, but maybe tomorrow, today's not a good day. These are 2 great responses. If you can think of another one, let me know in the comments. Next, your old friend asks you, hey, can you help me move this weekend? Now, maybe you just don't really want to help them move, or maybe you're busy. Let's think of a response. Go ahead and just think. I'd love to help you, but I get a sore back from lifting boxes. They'd have to respect that you just cannot lift boxes. Or maybe you'd say, I'd love to help, but I've actually already got plans, so I won't be able to. I hope you find someone. Remember, saying, I hope you find someone is always polite. It's just, wishing them the best of luck. You can even just say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't this weekend. I'm already busy. I wish you luck, though. Okay, now the last one, you're interacting with a stranger at a restaurant. You have a plate at your table and you're not quite done with your food, but the server comes up to your table and says, hey, can I take your plate? What are you going to say to politely refuse? You might say, thank you for offering, but I'm actually not finished. Or you might say, thanks for asking, but I'm still working on my plate. These are very acceptable. And I say in a formal situation, thanking someone for offering first is probably the best polite move. Maybe you've heard of speech softening before in English. Let's go over this concept because this is one of the most important ways that you can improve your politeness in English. So you don't want to sound like a robot giving commands. You don't want to say, give me that report. Or even just adding please, although it is important, it doesn't exactly soften your language. So you're going to have to add some words into your demands to make them sound polite. Instead of saying, give me that report, you will say, can you give me that report when you get a chance? Instead of saying, I need help, you might say, I was wondering if you could help me.
I was wondering if you could help me get a gun.
Using phrases like, I was wondering, would you mind, would it be possible? These are all speech softening phrases that just added to your demands make them way more polite and way more respectful to whoever you're working with or whoever you're having a conversation with. Another really good phrase that I want you to use when making requests is if you start by saying, it would be great if you could, or it would be great with this help, whatever it might be. So speech softening is one of the most important tips for polite English. Maybe you've heard this phrase in English or in your own language, but you'll always catch more flies with honey. This means if you make your demands sweet, people are more likely to do what you have asked or to help you in any situation. So these modal verbs are going to be what you use to catch more flies with honey. They're very sweet and they make your demands more sweet. So funny enough, sometimes when we make these demands with modal verbs, they are demands and they are commands, but we're making it seem to the listener like they have a choice. So we're using the words could, would. Could you do this? Instead of saying shut the door, could you shut the door?
Could you shut the door, please?
Or instead of saying give me your opinion on this, we say would you give me your opinion on this? So could, would, should, might. These are all modal verbs that can help your English demands sound more like options for the person. And again, it just sweetens your speech and makes it sound way more polite when you use these words to make a request or a demand. The bottom line is when you're asking rather than telling, even if it doesn't really seem like there is an option for the person to do what you're asking them to do, it is showing respect to the person's time and effort by giving them a chance to say, oh yeah, sure, I can do that. So speaking of just really subtle, small things we can add into our speech to either soften it or make it more polite, one thing that native speakers do without even thinking about it is when we're making our requests, we use the past tense. Instead of saying, do you want to get coffee? We'll say, hey, did you want to get coffee with me? We're using the past tense. It just comes off as something that we've been thinking about, we've been caring about for a while, and it doesn't put the person on the spot so much. Like, do you want to get coffee? That seems like a very immediate question. Oh, did you want to get coffee? Was that something that you wanted to do? It's like, I care about how you have felt for a while now.
Did you want coffee? Tea?
Instead of saying, do you have a pen I could borrow? Hey, did you have a pen that I could borrow? This means, have you had one? I've been thinking about this for a while. Again, this seems strange to teach because it's like, why would just using the past tense make that big of a difference? But it's so natural to English speakers that if you try to adopt this technique, it will just come off as just the slightest more respectful and polite and less direct in English. Another great way that we can use the past tense to make our requests sound more polite is we can say, I was wondering. I was wondering if you wanted to get coffee. I was wondering if you could help me with this. I was wondering if you had a pen that I could borrow. Again, all past tense requests and asks, but they just soften up by using this phrase, I was wondering. These next two tips are so small, but they make the biggest difference. So I really want you to try these out when you're trying to speak politely in English. So again, for making requests, you're always going to want to make it into a question rather than an imperative sentence. Avoid imperative sentences and just make it a question instead of saying, call me later. Could you call me later? Or another trick that I have been teaching English learners is to use the word let's. I love let's for speech softening. It doesn't come naturally to English learners, but it definitely comes natural to native speakers like myself. When we use the word let's, it's making it sound like we're all of a sudden a team. Let's talk later, or let's talk on the phone later. Instead of just a demand to the other person, it's saying we're going to do this together.
Bye, Michael. Let's talk later.
Even if you are telling someone to do something, instead of saying do this now, hey, let's try this out now. This means you go do it. It's a funny way of telling the person to do it, but it's like, we're a team, you're going to go do this, and then we'll figure out if it works well. Let's go do this. This means you go do it.
Let's go do this.
Sometimes just staying positive in a conversation can really help show the other person that you appreciate their work, you appreciate the things that they're doing, and you're not trying to be negative, although you have to be honest sometimes. So let's say that someone gives you a piece of work, they've been working on it, and you don't think it's going to work for your project or for your plan. You can start out by saying, I love the effort on this. Could we try this a little bit different? So you always want to lead with that positive when you're giving criticism or you're asking for something else in addition to the project they've already completed. You're going to want to also avoid negatives and just try to rephrase it in a more positive light as well. Instead of saying no, or you can't, or you don't want to, say, could I try again later? Would it be okay if we did this differently later? Would it be okay if you asked this person instead? So instead of just saying, no, you can't do it, or you don't want to do it, you're kind of making a suggestion to help the person move on from you doing it. When you're trying to be polite, it's important to apologize beforehand. It just signals to the person that you're being very considerate of their time and effort, and you wouldn't want to bother them if you didn't have to, if you weren't absolutely forced to ask for their help. So instead of saying, could you help me on this? You'll say, I'm sorry to bother you. Could you help me on this? Or, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy. Would you be able to help me with this? Just apologizing beforehand just shows your respect for their time, and it's really essential to being polite in English. The last tip that I'm going to give you for today for sounding polite in English is just always showing respect for other people's time. You're always appreciating someone's time when they help you or when they do something for you. Instead of apologizing, you might want to just start with, I know you're really busy, or I really appreciate your time. I know you have a lot on your plate. This English phrase, to have a lot on your plate, it just means you have a lot of responsibilities. Or you can even just say, I know you have a lot going on, but would you be able to help me with this? And this is a really important thing for just building connections with people in English, just acknowledging their time. Everybody has a lot going on in life. So it's just really important to show that you empathize with how busy they are or how much effort it takes to help you. Which techniques in today's lesson were you most surprised about? A lot of people haven't heard of using this past tense to sound polite. A lot of people haven't used modal verbs before. Which are you going to use in your everyday conversations? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to download the PDF so that you can review these polite tips on your own as well. I'll make sure to put another polite video on screen next so you can keep learning with me, and I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Goodbye!